All right, good evening, everyone. It's 7 p.m. on the dot, so let's dive into tonight's presentation, which is about individual donors. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend tonight's presentation. My name is Nathan Zabidio. I am a program specialist in our fiscal sponsorship program here at Fractured Atlas. I hope everyone can hear me okay. In fact, would someone mind using the GoToWebinar chat functionality to confirm with me that you can hear the sound of my voice? That would be much appreciated, just so that I know that I'm not talking out into the void. Thank you so much, everyone, for confirming. One time I started giving one of these presentations and got through about 10 minutes of content before someone messaged me, "Is this thing still happening?" Because I'd forgotten to click begin presentation. So just want to make sure I'm not duplicating material and having to go back and repeat myself. But thanks for confirming. If there are any problems with audio or visuals over the course of the presentation, please do use the chat functionality to let me know. I'll do my best to troubleshoot as we go. There'll also be the time for questions at the end, but feel free to chat me questions throughout. If what you ask is super relevant in the moment, I'll probably stop and respond to it. Otherwise, it's more likely that I'm just going to save questions for the end and get them all out of the way at once. Tonight's presentation is also being recorded, so I'm going to send you a copy of the recording sometime later this week. So don't feel the need to take copious amounts of notes. Just follow along and listen. All right, that's all the housekeeping I have. So let's dive right in. First off, it's nice to meet you, even in just this digital setting. Can you all confirm that you can see a slide that has a bunch of human faces on it? Just want to make sure I've got the visuals down too, in addition to the audio. Great, thank you. This is the fiscal sponsorship team at Fractured Atlas. I am in the middle because why wouldn't I be? Again, my name is Nathan Zabidio. I've been with Fractured Atlas for about a little more than 5.5 years now. And it's my privilege to get up every day and help artists and arts organizations become more effective fundraisers through our fiscal sponsorship program. I want to introduce you to the other lovely people on this slide. We're not really in a circle. I guess we are. We're in a circle around Nathan. But let's just go all the way over to the left. All the way on the left-hand side of the screen, that's Kat Thompson. She's one of 2 membership associates. And then directly above her, so above me to the left, is Teresa Hubbard, who is also a program specialist in fiscal sponsorship. Continuing clockwise, we have Aisha Jordan, who is a program associate. And then all the way on the far right is Courtney Harge, who is a member advisor. Below her is Sabrina Cedeno, who is another membership associate. And then finishing up this circle around Nathan is Lauren Lattimore, who is another program associate. And if you're new to Fractured Atlas or to our fiscal sponsorship program, you could be dealing with any one of us at any given time, depending upon what your inquiry is. I can tell you we're adding within the next month 3 new staff members. So if you attend a webinar next month or sometime in the fall, you'll see 3 new faces on this slide. Let's see if there's anything else that I want to say about this slide. We have roughly 4,000 fiscally sponsored projects across the United States, and we're able to administer a program that serves that many people with a team this small because our program is largely automated and exists on our website. There's a lot of functionality at your fingertips that you have access to. But again, just give us a call, shoot us an email. You'll likely be talking to one of the 7 of these lovely people, and hope you do reach out to us soon. So let's get started. Here's a breakdown of the funds raised through Fractured Atlas's fiscal sponsorship program. As you can see, more than 50% of the funds that we receive for the purposes of our sponsored projects come from individual donors, while less than 40% comes from foundations and less than 10% from other sources. And I put this slide in here so that you can see that when you're considering the amount of time that you're dedicated dedicating to your fundraising activities, maybe you want to spend a little less than 2/3 of it, roughly 60%, on soliciting individual donors and having a robust plan in place for getting the vast majority of your contributed revenue from individuals. This maps out to how other arts and culture institutions in the United States receive their funding, where the lion's share of it is going to come in the form of individual support. Um, Again, this is true for the Metropolitan Opera in New York City or the Getty Museum in Los Angeles, right on down to mom and pop arts nonprofits in small towns across the United States. The vast majority is coming from individuals. A lot of people think that grants are a magic wand that they can wave, where you send out a bunch of grant applications and you get your budget funded for the year. I'm here to disabuse you of that notion. Yes, you want to be applying for grants and corporate sponsorship opportunities that you are a eligible competitive candidate for, but with this presentation, I hope to hammer home that individual giving is really going to be the key to meeting your budget needs year over year. And I've kind of gone through my intro here a little bit prematurely. I should have been saying all of that spiel over these 3 slides. So this slide is, what about grants? Aren't they usually in larger sums, and aren't they more reliable because they come from institutions? While they make up about 1/3 of our income, you can't rely on them because they are incredibly competitive and might not come through year over year. Statistically, grants are the most competitive type of support that exists, and the pot of money that's been available from institutional funders has been decreasing each year. We're keeping our fingers crossed that the National Endowment for the Arts is going to survive the next 4 years, but it's a worrying indicator that they might be eliminated from the federal budget. That's likely going to affect arts giving in other major institutions across the United States, including arts councils and various foundations. So we don't want to be relying on grants to meet our budget needs. The best way to create a sustainable funding model is to build a donor base made up of individuals rather than a few grants that may or may not come through each year. So how do we find donors? That's what this presentation's about, cultivating individual donors. It's not just about asking for money. It's about building relationships with individuals that care about the impact that you're making in your field, in your community, with your art. And I know this sounds crazy, but the most important thing to remember when soliciting a donation is that it's not about begging for money. Often, in fact, every day, I talk to artists who encounter an initial queasiness when it comes to asking individuals to support the work that they're doing. And this is an early bar, an early threshold that a new artist or arts organization or an artist that's embarking on fundraising for the first time really needs to leap over quickly if they're to actually get their first donation and get the ball rolling on their work. What it really is about conveying your vision and showing what the path forward is for you as an artist and inviting your donors on the journey with you. Your ultimate goal, remember, is not to raise money, but to use that money to create something great. You'll want to tell a compelling story so that your donors know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Keep in mind that what you're really doing is expanding your movement. In other words, you're inviting donors to become a part of your work and to help you make an impact. We need to understand that fundraising is about creating the opportunity for others to be part of the solution. There's a professor at NYU who I regularly present in her class, and she describes the act of fundraising as uh, as giving another individual the opportunity to make a donation. So what you're really doing is presenting someone else with the chance to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And you're going to want to ask yourself a series of questions in order to figure out exactly what to say to your potential donors. Uh, you know, when I want to speak from my own experience, before I became a part of the fiscal sponsorship team here at Fractured Atlas, I was actually a card-carrying member of Fractured Atlas, where I was using our various programs and services to fundraise and produce some passion projects that I had. I'm a theater director, and I worked with some collaborators to produce some plays roughly 6 years ago. I still do it on an ongoing basis, but don't want to give you TMI about my life story. In any case, when I first set out to write my first fundraising appeal letter, I sat down, and the final product that I put together was like 6 or 7 pages long, where I really just word vomited onto the page everything that I thought donors needed to know about my life. How am I doing? What's the status on Nathan as an artist, and what's the work that's going on? Way too much information. So when you are sitting down to create your own individual appeal materials, let's talk through the questions that you're going to want to ask yourself. There's a great business book by Simon Sinek called Start with Why. And that's where you should start as well. Why are you doing what you're doing? Clearly, you're creating an artistic product or providing an artistic service, but what is the compelling need or problem that you hope that your project addresses? Now, maybe you started a theater company or a film production company or creating like a web series that is primarily to give yourself an outlet for work. I want to tell you that likely that's not a good enough why. Is self-promotion. Really, what you want to be doing is saying, what's the big issue that my web series addresses? Or what community is my theater company serving that is going to be, immediately benefiting from the work that we're doing? Um, when we address problems at Fractured Atlas, let's say we've got a program that's not working, or a new initiative that we're struggling to wrap our brains around, we often go back to why. What is the objective that we're trying to accomplish with this? And is the new initiative that we're launching successfully doing that or not? Usually framing our solutions and our work around the why is going to help us straighten things out in the long run. And certainly when it comes time to communicate things to donors, you want to start with, what's the big idea? Why are you doing this? Part of that is, who is affected by this problem or impacted by the situation? In other words, who is your audience, or who will you serve with this work? And try to be pretty specific about it. If I'm a, a potential donor looking at a crowdfunding campaign, let's say, for your dance company, it's really going to help me to know that, what you're really doing with your dance is you are giving senior citizens on Long Island an opportunity to perform that they currently don't have access to. And your dance recitals are for them and their families. That's pretty freaking specific about who you're serving, and I challenge you to be as specific when you think about your constituency or the audience that you're going to serve. We also want to talk about, how is your project going to present an innovative solution or solve the problem at hand? What is unique about your and your team's qualifications or capabilities or life story that makes you the best people to solve this problem? So maybe, to go off of my random example of a dance company out on Long Island, maybe I'm a choreographer, but my colleague is someone who regularly works in assisted living facilities and has been already matching senior citizens to artistic and cultural opportunities. Think about, what unique things that you bring to the table that are how you're going to use your project to present an innovative solution. And what is that solution? So often I read an individual appeal letter that doesn't tell me jack about what the project is. you want to get really explicit about it. I am producing Hamlet in Nashville, and I am giving free tickets to local high school students so that they can be exposed to this play. That's great. That's a single paragraph that explicitly communicates to me as a potential donor exactly what's going on. And part of that are what are your strategies? You know, what action steps are you taking? What's your timeline for, saying, okay, on April 1st, we're renting the theater space. On April 15th, we are holding auditions. Think through what are the actual steps that you're going to take to achieve this goal, and which of those are relevant to be communicated to potential donors. So hopefully once you've asked yourself the who, what, where, when, why, the real basic questions, you've come up with a long list of bullet points or potential answers for you to mix and match in different donor materials. Not all donors are going to be interested in the same content. If I'm thinking about what potential pools of donors am I reaching out to, if I'm starting up a film production company, let's say, or a web series, I'm thinking maybe the letters I write to my immediate family and friends are going to have slightly different content than the ones I'm writing to my former elementary school classmates, or other filmmakers, or people that are interested in whatever the content of the web series that I'm doing is. So as you answer these questions, kind of think about which answers, which content is going to be most relevant to which audiences. So as you're writing your materials or you're crafting your pitch to give to individual donors, make sure that what you're doing is offering a unique solution that highlights your specific ability to carry out that solution. So this is in the who, what questions that you're asking. You know, I am a choreographer out on Long Island, partnering with someone who works in assisted living facilities to allow um, maybe physically impaired older adults to perform. That's honestly a whole paragraph in an individual appeal letter that is kind of pre-written for you. Just think through explicitly who you are, what you're doing, what your solution is. Part of that, the other half of that, is pointing out the benefit to your donors. So I'm creating a solution, and I'm appealing to your humanity as a donor by letting you know the good work that we could be doing together through your contribution. I'm doing this work, you're giving me money to make that happen, and then how the work might benefit them. So if you're fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, your donations getting them their donation, in exchange for their donation, they're getting a tax receipt. But maybe if they're going to attend that production of Hamlet in Nashville, they're going to get a free ticket in exchange, or they're going to get to have their high school age children attend or participate in this production in some way. So these questions are going to help you organize your thoughts before approaching potential donors. Once you've thought them through and answered them for yourselves, again, start using this information to start crafting your appeals. Identify your goals. So I am producing Hamlet on May 25th through 30th, and then communicate them. Again, I'm not joking with you when I tell you I'm reading individual appeal letters every day where it's incredibly vague to me what the goal is, what the big picture is. So in addition to having your explicit, this is the art that I'm making and when goal to communicate, what's your actual financial goal? And I need to raise $25,000 to do that. Oh, the sound cut out? Can anyone hear me? Someone said their sound cut out, and I just wanna. Okay, great. It might be a local issue with maybe a couple people's, I don't know, internet issue. Looks like my voice coming through. Thanks everyone for confirming. I appreciate that. Um, Okay, so be able to communicate what your monetary goal is, and keep this objective front and center so that your audience knows what you're trying to do and how they can help. Your goals should be what's driving your campaign and your initiative, again, not the act of fundraising itself. So, as you craft appeals, like I said, likely you are putting together different messages for different audiences. As you do that and as you send them out, keep track of which types of communication have the best results and maybe rehone what you're doing to focus more on that style. Remember that different people might respond differently to different voices and different forms of communication, so you'll probably need to adapt different styles depending upon who you're approaching. Part of this, most important, is to remember to keep your communication personal. So, like I said, your family and friends probably have a different interest in your work than maybe distant acquaintances. So, what I'd actually encourage you to do is start to think about different pools of potential donors that you're reaching out to. And maybe try to get as descriptive with them as possible. So maybe, yeah, sure, family, friends, that's one pool. But maybe, if I'm starting that dance company out on Long Island, I would want to have a pool that is fellow dancers or fellow choreographers or people that live in my immediate neighborhood that care about the arts, or maybe people who have elderly parents who would be interested in having their parents participate in this project. So start to think through different pools of donors, um, and again, be really specific on who they are, so that your tone and your communication is as personalized for each of those pools as possible. Now, be sure to use some kind of interactive online tool when working with online fundraising or when working with any kind of fundraising. I have a checkbook because I have to pay rent, but maybe other people have their rent deducted from their bank account automatically and don't otherwise keep a checkbook. So they are only able to make online donations. And also think about, the first time you hear about something new, what's one of the first things you do to find out more information about it? In most cases, you're going to do like a Google search for that project or company or person. So you want to make sure that your project is also Googleable. Ideally, your project should take up at least one search result on that first page of results in order to ensure that you're getting good traffic on it. But that means that you should be keeping an up-to-date website that's easy to navigate so that your potential donors and audience members can easily find the information that they need. They shouldn't need to scroll or click more than twice to make a donation. So, for example, if you have a donation tab on your website, make sure that that is like front and center and not buried somewhere. And then when they click on the tab, all the information that they should need to donate should be right there with like a link to your donation page on Fractured Atlas. Or if you're using our Artfully ticketing and customer relations management software, you have the option to embed a donation widget right onto your website so that your donors are not redirected to another page to make a donation. And this is a pretty good solution for the too many clicks problem, but again, just try to make it as convenient and involve as little thought as possible on behalf of your donors in order for them to contribute. When someone Googles your project, one hit will likely be your fiscal sponsorship online profile on our website. And so just make sure that this profile is updated regularly to reflect your current fundraising efforts and any current projects you're working on. You can also link your online profile to your Facebook and Twitter page. So let's talk about social media for a bit. You're probably going to want to use that. Studies have shown that 96% of millennials have joined a social network, so people born between like 1980 and 2000. But the fastest growing demographic in social media is actually people over the age of 50. So this is not just a youth situation. Considering the number of people using social media and the ease with which people can share information using social media, it can be one of the most important tools that you use in your fundraising. Social media can be especially helpful when running a crowdfunding campaign, as it is the best way to make your campaign go quote unquote viral. If you have a social media presence, your followers can help out by spreading the word about your work, hopefully on their own Twitter pages or Facebook pages. One thing that I urge people who are using social media to do is to invest time in it, maybe a few months prior to them actually beginning fundraising in earnest. So, for example, if I create a Facebook page for a brand new pottery studio, and then I ask a bunch of people to like it, and the very first things I post to that Facebook page are please make a donation, likely you're going to get a lot of people unliking that page or burying your posts or just kind of ignoring them. What you really need to do is kind of build that online community either on your Facebook page or your Instagram account or your Twitter page, so that you already have a group of people who are listening to you or clicking through to the cool stories that you're sharing or liking the photos that you're posting, so that in a couple months' time, when you then say, I'm so happy that you enjoy the work that we're doing through our social media page. Please consider making a donation. Here's a link to our crowdfunding campaign. And oh, by the way, would you mind sharing it on your Facebook page as well? You already have an audience of people who are predisposed to like you because they've engaged with you in a non-fundraising capacity, and hopefully that much more inclined to show you support or share your campaign with others. So whether you're using social media, again, you probably should be using it. Whether you're using a website, whether you're writing a letter, it's important to guide your donors through the process of contributing. It's important to be very clear about what you want from your donors and how they can give to you, so that that there are explicit instructions somewhere for how to donate. Like I mentioned, communicating your goal is pretty important. So if you're saying I need $25,000 to produce this production of Hamlet in Nashville, that's one half of it. But another good idea is to have a specific ask amount for the donor as well. And I would encourage you to maybe go the extra mile and think about, on a individual by individual basis, how much you're going to ask that person to contribute. So, for example, if I'm reaching out to all of my former elementary school classmates who maybe I haven't talked to in like decades, maybe I'm not asking them for $500. Maybe I'm not even really aware what their income situation is. So I would say, hey, I haven't seen you since we graduated from 8th grade. I'd love to hang out sometime. I'm hoping that you'll consider making a $25 donation to the work that I'm doing. Something light, low commitment, easy for them to then say, oh, I've got $25 and I remember you from 8th grade, sure. If I'm reaching out to like my uncle who maybe works for an oil company and might have more capacity to give, I have a little bit of a better relationship with them, then I might say, I'm really hoping that you'll consider making a donation of $2,500 or whatever amount might be appropriate for what I know about them and their capacity to give. Let's see. You'll also want to clarify for your donors that especially if they want their donation to be tax deductible, that it's going to come to Fractured Atlas. So their credit card statement and their tax receipt will show Fractured Atlas on it as the recipient. So related to having an ask amount, make sure that you're specific about asking for money. Even if you're a little queasy about saying, oh, please donate $500. Okay, I get that. Maybe you don't want to ask your upstairs neighbor for a specific amount of money. You just want to leave it up to them to make the donation. Still ask for a donation. I read a lot of letters that say, we're looking for your support. And that's really as specific as they get. And anyone can give you support. I support you morally or in spirit. I'm giving you a virtual pat on the back here. But you really want to be explicit about, I'm looking for monetary support. I'm looking for you to make a donation. I would also encourage you to put that in the first paragraph of your letter or right at the top of your donation page on your website, so that if you've sent me a link or I'm opening up a letter in the mail, I'm right away clear on what the nature of this communication is and what you're looking for from me. Again, it's important to make clear that your goal is not to raise funds. It's to make art that will serve a greater audience. Raising funds is just a means to that end that will help you achieve that goal. Think through rewarding supporters for your success. This often comes up in crowdfunding campaigns. So, often you'll see in it for $100, you'll get a shout out on our Twitter page. For $250, you'll get a free ticket to the show. So think about what rewards you could offer to potentially incentivize donations. And also make sure that it's proportional to the amount that someone's giving, especially if you are giving away things that cost real money. You don't want to bake a plate of cookies for everyone that's donating $20. Likely it's going to cost you more than you're raising to just fulfill that, even in terms of your own time. If you're worth $25 an hour and you're dedicating several hours to baking a bunch of cookies in exchange for $20 donations, that is not a good use of your time and capacity. It might make sense to reserve special gifts for your larger donors so that they feel especially important as a thank you to for their contribution. Maybe inviting them to open rehearsals or inviting them to dinner with you as an artist or with other artists that you can facilitate introductions for. It doesn't make sense to offer this at a lower donation amount because you're going to exhaust your resources too quickly. And remember to keep it simple. Your rewards should make sense with your project or with your mission, and they shouldn't break your budget. So, for $20, maybe just a thank you note. For $50,000, maybe you're going to fly them out to a screening of your film. Let's see, I had another point to make about this. I wanted to go back to make sure it makes sense with your project or your mission. Unless your project is about baking cookies, don't send a plate of cookies. If my film is, I'm doing I'm doing a comedy where I am playing an inept pastry chef, sure, send them a plate of terrible cookies, but otherwise, make sure that your rewards are relevant to the work that you're doing. To use a little bit less of a ridiculous example, there are a lot of standard crowdfunding rewards, t-shirts, mugs with logos on it, baseball caps with logos on it. These are nice, but they're not necessarily super relevant to the work that you're doing. If I'm giving out a baseball cap for my opera, does that really make sense? Maybe if my opera is about like a baseball team, but otherwise, I would encourage you to not just come up with random semi-irrelevant rewards to give your donors. Fractured Atlas makes it relatively easy for you to offer rewards to your donors by giving you the option of setting up giving levels on your donation landing page. And when your donors contribute, they have the option of selecting any giving level that they qualify for, which you can then track in your donation history. Okay, so once you've gotten people to make a donation, that's really not the end of the relationship. Oh, I love this slide. That D should be uppercase. I'm saying this out loud so that you don't think capitalization is not important to me. Either they should all be lowercase, or maybe the K should be uppercase and the others, that D should be uppercase. Anyway, once you've gotten someone to make a donation, that really shouldn't be the end of the relationship. In fact, if I make a donation and then never hear from you, which has happened several times, that actually is going to make me a little bit annoyed. So think about other ways to keep your donors involved in the life of your work or your project. Maybe you can develop an advisory committee that consists of donors that you set up conference calls or Skype chats with so that they're involved in and giving feedback, but also advice. Be sure to write a personalized thank you gift to each one of them immediately upon receiving the gift. But in addition, be sure to send out regular updates. Yes, thank you for the gift, but maybe a month in the future, hey, we reached our goal. Isn't that fantastic? Hopefully, you can come see the film in a couple months' time. And I would emphasize the word personalized in the thank you note because I think a nice human signature, at the very least, if not a handwritten card, is going to just add a personal touch that shows your donors how important they are to you. Another important component of keeping your donors feeling special is to be sure to use their preferred method of correspondence. If your donor doesn't respond to emails, don't email them. Likewise, if they don't return your phone calls, maybe that's not the best way to get in touch with them either. This is a place where I'd like to quickly plug, I mentioned it a few slides ago, Artfully, which is our in-house custom designed ticketing and customer relations management software. It's free for any member of Fractured Atlas to use, even at our free community level of membership. But if you are fiscally sponsored, it will probably come in especially handy because it's a bit more powerful than just the standard donation history page on your My Fiscal Sponsorship page on our website. All of your donor contact info is going to sync to your Artfully listing, but you can also use Artfully to keep track of how and when you've contacted with your donors. And let's say that you have a group of donors that does prefer to get a phone call from you over receiving like an email newsletter, you can all assign them the same phone call attribute so that in 2 or 3 months' time, when you're pulling lists of donors for a new initiative or fundraising drive that you're running, you can say, hey, who are all the donors that want us to receive my newsletter? Or who are all the donors that want to get a phone call from me? And create segmented lists of patrons so that around any number of criteria, not just how do I want to reach out to them, but it becomes especially important when you are determining, well, what are the different methods of correspondence that I need to use? You can also keep track of when you reached out to them and if they took any action in response. So you can say, John Smith sent email newsletter on May 9th, 2017. And then you can see May 11th, 2017, John Smith bought a ticket to my play, or John Smith made a $50 donation, which is pretty real-time feedback on the success of your outreach. And this is just a little bit more about Artfully. Not only use it to sell tickets and take donations, but also a lot of the back end stuff I just described here. Um, a lot of people love the ticket selling donation widget aspect of it, and the CRM backend is not immediately maybe obvious in terms of its value, but I really think that having this very powerful virtual Rolodex on the back end it is so valuable in the long term. When I was fundraising, a lot of my donor contact info existed in multiple various spreadsheets that lived in different people's email inboxes or, on legal pads. So just make sure to have it all in one place, whether you use Artfully or some other CRM or method of organizing them is pretty key. So in addition to sending out your thanks and updates, just really keep your donors in the loop. Invite them to events, invite them to your screenings or showcases so that they can see firsthand what their gift went towards. Survey them. Ask them for feedback. If you've sent out a newsletter to 2,000 people, what's a small group of 20 of them that you can send out a personal email to saying, hey, your feedback is so valuable to me. You are an important supporter of the work that we do. And I'd like to know, what did you think of that newsletter that we sent? Does it look good? What do you think of the aesthetic choices? Do you think of the content? Is it interesting to you? I'd suggest starting with your friends and family, asking both those who have donated and those who haven't what they think about your donor solicitation materials. What did they like? What didn't they like? What do you think? What do they think you could have done differently? Advice is free. When I'm coaching artists that are maybe a little bit nervous about reaching out to certain donors, I might say, hey, ask them for advice first. Say, I'm doing this new project. I know that you love the arts or you're involved in the arts. Would you mind reading over the newsletter I'm about to send out. Um, so people are going to be happy to give you advice, especially if you're reaching out to them on a personal level. But this will be important as you continue to expand your donor base. You should continue to, on an ongoing basis, survey your most faithful donors in order to continue refining the way you interact with them. One thing that people often don't ask their donors is, why did you donate? What made you decide to make a donation? Sometimes it'll be like, well, you are my son and I love you, so clearly I'm making a donation. But maybe it is my upstairs neighbor. I'm like, God, I'm so grateful you donated. Why did you do that? Was it because you liked the work that you were doing? What did you respond to in the messaging that we sent you? Um, Oh, and I wanted to touch base quickly again on developing an advisory committee. Maybe you are starting an arts organization and want to kind of test out what a board of directors situation would look like. Um, but I think an advisory committee is a great way to keep especially high value donors feeling valued and very in the loop. But you can also maybe leverage some of their capacity to help you do some of the important tasks like send thank you notes or make calls to donors. Clearly, if someone's making a donation, they feel invested in the success of your work. So, what kind of volunteer labor can you get out of them, or what more can they do other than make a donation to support the work that you're doing? Okay, let's talk a little bit about the reasons why people give, because I think it's important to potentially, in addition to, you've answered all the who, what, where, when, why questions, you've maybe thought through which bits of information are most relevant to which donors, but let's think about just broadly why people give, because I think it's kind of important to maybe pinpoint as you identify specific donors, well, why does this person usually make a donation? Can I come up with the best guess? So let's just think about this. The first is, and most important, is hopefully that they care about the success of you and your work. So likely if my mom is making a donation, she cares about my success. Or if one of my collaborators is making a donation, they really are invested in the success of the work that we're doing. Then hopefully there are others who are a bit more distant from you that see, hey, this dance company for senior citizens on Long Island, this is valuable. I want to see this succeed. Or this production of Hamlet in Nashville. I love Shakespeare. I would, of course, want to see this go off well. So there will always be a group of donors that is donating because they care about the success of you and your work. Two, they might care about the audience that you're serving. So they might care about those senior citizens, and they might want to help you bring your service to that audience. So that's a second reason. A third is uh, maybe they want to do the work that you're doing, or they really want to help the cause that you're hoping to advance, but they can't give time, so they give money instead. A fourth reason is they are incentivized by the potential status that comes from being recognized as a donor. You go to a production of the Public Theater in New York, and all over the lobby and in their programs, they are listing their most high valued benefactors. So there is a little bit of social cachet involved for some of those people, and that's another reason that people often feel incentivized to make a donation. And others really straight up just want the tax deduction. So I would think about those 5 reasons: the people that care about you and the success of your work, the people that care about your audience, the people who would otherwise want to do this work but can really only give money, the people who want the status, the social cachet, and the people who want to make a tax deduction, and kind of think about making pitches that appeal to multiple, if not all, of those reasons. So when you're actually crafting your appeals, uh, what do you want to do? I mean, what do you want to create? You want to have printed materials maybe that are easy for donors to just pick up with them when they attend your show, or that if you're going door to door, you can leave something behind with them that they can take and review later. An accessible website. All of these things should be up to date. Um, So those things probably are for the people that care about you, or that care about your work, or that care about your audience. Maybe think about creating opportunities for people to volunteer. So if I'm someone who is a frustrated theater artist, let's say, and I'm like, oh my God, you're doing Hamlet in Nashville. God, I wish I could be doing that. Maybe I would be interested in ushering at the play. So think about, I've made a donation. What kind of volunteer work can I do for you? Turn people who say no into people who are really saying not yet by maybe asking them for something else. So, oh, you can't make a donation, but do you have any art supplies lying around that you would be willing to make a contribution of for our art classes? Are you an accountant who might be able to give us some pro bono financial advice? Do you work for an office that has meeting space that we could maybe borrow on the weekends or in evenings so that our advisory committee can meet? While you're doing this, track your contacts so that you know when and who you've been connecting with. Artfully can help you do this. And if they can't give dollars, maybe they can bring a friend along to your play or share your work on their Facebook page or on their Twitter account. So finding as many different ways to give people to get people to give, starting with the financial, but going through the full gamut of potential ways that people could support your work. So if I could just switch gears a little bit. Another big pitfall that I notice when I'm reading through donor materials is, you know, I go back to don't beg. Don't apologize for begging because it's not begging, it's offering someone the opportunity to give. So stay positive, have the right attitude, believe that as an arts leader, what you have to offer is of great value, and that value is eventually someday going to be self-evident to the people that you're communicating it to. Keep in mind that, again, you're not asking for a handout. You're offering the chance for them to be a part of something great and beneficial to a group of people larger than themselves. So, even if you got to fake that confidence, fake it till you make it. Because if I get a letter that's like, oh, I'm so sorry to be talking to you about money, I really need a donation, and well, you don't have to. I'm going to be like, no, I'm not going to make a donation unless, like, unless you're my son. I'm probably not going to make a donation unless your materials convey confidence about your project, about your competence, about your capabilities. So if you're writing a letter, be sure to use simple, straightforward language. Use lots of nouns and verbs. Uh, don't have flowery adjectives and adverbs all over the place. Format it so that it's easy to read. Break it up into several paragraphs. Don't use ugly fonts. Make them easy to read fonts. And if you're having a hard time determining if it's easy to read or not, we'll be happy to tell you. But also maybe give it to someone and say, hey, what do you think of this font? They'll probably give you a really either, oh, looks good, or that is hideous. Be sure to keep it to 1 or 2 pages. I made that mistake when I was first setting out fundraising. 6 or 7 page letters do not get many responses. The longer it is, the more likely it is for your donors to stop reading. Again, ask for money, not just broad support. And like I said, don't bury it deep into the body of your letter. Put it in the first paragraph or the first couple paragraphs if at all possible. It's likely that even if it's a 2-page letter, your donors might not read all the way to the end. So they'll say, oh, okay, Nashville Theater Company producing Hamlet, blah, 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 looking for a donation. Great, great, great. Content, content, content. I'm going to make a donation. They might not even need to read everything that you've put together before they consider actually making a contribution. Give them a reason to send money now. Let them know what your time frame is. You need the money now, not in 6 months. Let them know that you need $25,000 by May 25th in order to make this successful. Another quick tip is to use a lot of you. So your donation will do XYZ. Your support, you as an individual donor, are very important to this process. When I tell people about crafting a story around the work that they're doing for their letters, I challenge them to put it in the second person. So not the first person where it's like, I'm saving the world, not the third person where this project will, work with lots of special children in New York City. No, you're saying you are an important part of the work that we're doing. You're saving the world. You're going to solve these children's problems in New York City. You're going to be giving your donation is giving them the art classes. Um, and part of this is basing your appeal on benefits and not on needs. Again, we want to have a positive outlook. We're not coming off as like, if I don't have this $25,000, we're going to go belly up. Even if that's true, the $25,000 we're seeking to raise is going to some positive purpose other than just keeping our lights on or keeping you employed. It's going towards, a really positive benefit, hopefully. And we have a template for letters on our My Fiscal Sponsorship page, but I would also encourage you to do some light Googling. You could probably find a lot of other really good examples or templates for amazing appeal letters. And just quickly remember, if you're fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, excuse me, you'll need to have your donor materials approved by us before you send them out to your potential donors. Okay, so let's talk quickly about maximizing donations. How else can you make sure that you're getting the most out of your solicitations? Well, here are the three major ways to maximize donations for your project. First, monthly gifts are important for any fundraising campaign because they allow your donors to contribute less at any one time, which allows them to give more over a longer stretch of time. Let's look at two different donor profiles, comparing a monthly donor versus a one-time donor. So on the left, we have the one-time donor. We made at least 3 appeals to them over the course of the year, and they gave 3 donations. Excuse me, I have hiccups and coughs at the same time in response to our appeals. So in the spring, they gave us 50. In the fall, they gave us 50. And then at the end of the year, they gave us 75. But we had to reach out to them at least 3 times in order to do that. So let's talk about a monthly donor. We've asked them for a smaller gift at the time of each transaction, so they're not donating $50 or $75 at one time. We're asking them for a really much more modest amount. We're saying, hey, would you be willing to donate $20, and could you do that every month? If we do that, we've only reached out to them that one time, and they've donated at often a much higher value over the course of a year than people that we've had to reach out to and cultivate several times, who are likely still maybe making decent-sized donations, but are doing it on a limited basis. It's also good to have that kind of guaranteed income where you're saying, great, oh my God, I got 10 people donating $20 a month. That's like a guaranteed $200 a month right there. And fortunately, our online functionality makes it easy for you to accept monthly contributions so that your donors can set up a monthly pledge right on our website. Their credit cards are going to be charged automatically on the same date every month. We have a separate webinar about strategies for monthly giving, so I'd encourage you to check that out. It might be on our knowledge base page on our website, but you should also look at our upcoming calendar for potential. It might be a presentation that we're offering in the relatively near future. Again, non-cash donations. I mentioned this briefly, but this is another great way to maximize your potential contributions. They don't need to be cash gifts. You can often eliminate entire budget line items by asking for a non-cash or in-kind gift. And this is especially important if your donor can't offer a monetary donation, but maybe has equipment or other materials, musical instruments to contribute. One thing I want to quickly mention is that only physical tangible items are considered tax deductible according to the IRS. So we can help you issue tax receipts for those types of donations, but not for donations of a person's time or services. And finally, the third way I'd encourage you to think about maximizing your in individual giving is matching gifts. Many companies match their employees' donations to charities. So make sure your donors are aware that Fractured Atlas can accept matching donations. The match will usually be 1-to-1. So if I donate $500, my employer will chip in another $500. But sometimes, and this is especially true if the employer is a foundation, um, their match will be at a higher ratio, so 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, or even I've seen matching gift programs that have 4-to-1 gifts. Um, so one thing I'd encourage you to do is once someone makes a donation, you say, "Oh my God, thank you so much for your gift. Is there the chance that your employer offers a matching gift program that we can take advantage of?" Odds are, if their employer is a major corporation, but even if it's like a small corporation, there might be an HR incentive with a matching gift program they can take advantage of. Almost every major corporation in America is going to have this. So maybe you want to do some research on who your donors actually work for. Generally, the process for matching gifts are going to start with your donors making the donation to us directly. From there, they need to report that donation to their employer. The employer often then checks in with us to confirm that we've received the donation, which we take care of that lickety-split. But it often is a couple-month lag time where maybe 2 to 3 months later, we actually get the check from the employer matching the original contribution. I want to quickly talk about crowdfunding. I can't believe that I've been talking for this long, and I want to open up for questions in a sec. We have a separate webinar about crowdfunding, so I don't want to go into it too much. It's 2017. You guys have seen Kickstarter campaigns. I don't need to define crowdfunding to you. It's definitely an important tool that we strongly encourage you to have in mind in your toolkit. Clearly, there are a lot of platforms out there. And you're welcome to use any one that you want, but we've created our own crowdfunding platform called Fundraising by Fractured Atlas. That is, you'd be able to create a campaign on this platform that would still be tax deductible and that's fully integrated with your fiscal sponsorship. The nice thing is that there's just our standard 7% fee, which actually ends up being lower than most crowdfunding campaign fees. With Indiegogo, for example, I hope I'm not misquoting this. I know that their base fee is either, I believe it's 4% that goes to them. And then there's a variable 3.5 to 5% processing fee, depending upon, I don't know, some factor of whether it's PayPal or credit card or what have you. So that ends up being 7.5%, just a base right there. So it's just our standard 7% fee, which is inclusive of credit card processing. Again, these donations are tax deductible. And the other nice thing about the integration with our fiscal sponsorship program is that, let's say you set up a 30-day campaign. All donations that we process are available 7 days after we receive them. So you don't have to wait till that 30-day campaign is up to access the funds that you've raised. If you receive a donation on day 1 of your campaign, you will be able to request it from us on day 7. You don't have to wait till the deadline's been reached. So I would encourage you to check it out. The URL is fundraising.fracturedatlas.org. And if you're already fiscally sponsored, you can go to your My Fiscal Sponsorship page and click the Accessorize button to start setting up a campaign. Okay, I'm going to open up for questions in a sec. I just want to quickly plug our other programs, just in case you're not aware. As a member of Fractured Atlas, you're eligible to apply for insurance quotes to meet any number of your arts business liability needs, workers' compensation, general liability. You want to cover your equipment in case it gets stolen, lost, or damaged. You can apply for quotes for those types of policies through our website. Talk about SpaceFinder quickly. This is our online marketplace that matches renters to venues based on their unique needs. It's not really nationwide. There are about a dozen instances of SpaceFinder across the United States and into Canada. So I would encourage you to check out to see if it's in your neck of the woods. This one, for example, is for the entire state of Massachusetts. But, obviously we have a robust SpaceFinder marketplace in New York City. But, just go to our website. You can see that we're in Atlanta and Los Angeles and Austin and Michigan, just to name a few. Finally, be sure to check out our other upcoming webinars. This is just a smattering of the ones that we give. We have recordings available on the the knowledge base area of our website, so you can check out recordings of previous webinars. And I'm going to actually open up for questions now. This is our contact information if for whatever reason you don't already have it. So I already have a question. Is Artfully capable of processing recurring donations? We're not under a fiscal sponsorship. So at this time, Artfully is just for one-time gifts. But I can tell you that monthly pledges, giving levels are on the docket for things that for functionality that we want to develop for Artfully. I would also like to say that Fundraising by Fractured Atlas is someday going to be open for not just fiscally sponsored projects, but also 501c3s to use. And in the future, you would be able to use the crowdfunding functionality to accept recurring monthly gifts. But right now, you would need to be fiscally sponsored in order to use our online donation functionality to accept recurring monthly pledges. It's a very good question. Okay, and all the other questions I had were actually just people confirming that they could hear the sound of my voice. So, it's 8 o'clock. If no one else has anything that they want to chime in about, I'm happy to end the call here. Again, I'm going to send you a link to the recording later this week. Great, another question. Is there a limit to how much any one individual donor can give? Great question. So we're happy to issue tax receipts for donations of any size, small as $1, large as $1 million. When it comes to a single credit card transaction, the maximum transaction that our processor can handle is $20,000. If you are in the enviable position of having a donor who wants to contribute more than $20,000 via credit card, I would first be interested in knowing how do they have that credit limit? I mean, what do they have, an Amex Black card? But also, what I would advise them to do is make that donation over several transactions that are $20,000 or less, with maybe waiting 5 minutes between transactions so that our system doesn't think that they're mistaken duplicates. In any case, the vast majority of people who are donating $20,000 or more are very likely doing it by check, and there is absolutely no limit to how small or large a check donation that we can process. All right, another great question. What is the average size donation that Fractured Atlas sees? I would need to run some specific numbers for you, but what I can tell you is that there was a survey done fairly recently by, it was some crowdfunding platform, and they found that the average crowdfunding donation size is around $75. So that's often what we ask people to keep in mind when they're establishing their goals. So, for example, if I'm saying, I need to raise $10,000, well, maybe start by dividing that number by 75. And that's the amount of people that I need to donate, on average, $75 to reach that goal. So that, just doing the math real quick, is 133 1/3 humans. So usually I tell people to base their expectations around an average donation size of $75. That said, you should be expecting donations larger than that, but also those smaller than that, and be working towards the larger ones. Who has a capacity, who do you know, or who's in your network that has a capacity to give more, and ask them for more. If you know that, hey, my uncle's a very successful and real estate investor, maybe I shouldn't be asking him for $75. Maybe I should be asking for a little bit more than that. I send out another question. I'm just going to read it. It's a little bit long. I send out special invites to check out our weekly group shows in the gallery to our collectors and fiscal supporters, and I feel like I'm sending them too much mail. That's a really good instinct to have. Do you think there's a ceiling on how much content you should be sending to donors, supporters? So what I would actually consider doing is sending them one thing, asking them to opt in to regular updates. And then really only send the people that opt in the really recurring bits of information. Maybe that's a separate call to action where it's like, we've got great updates to give you, and we'd love your permission to send them to you regularly. We don't want to overwhelm you with content. So please let me know if you want to receive these special emails. Because I think that you're right that there is the potential for some donor fatigue where they're like, oh my God, I've gotten like 100 emails from this guy this year. So um, be very mindful of that. I'm not going to give you a best case or best practice for one email a month max because it should be somewhat customized and personalized based on your relationship with some of these people. Obviously, if someone's coming to your weekly group shows every week or every other week, likely they probably are happy to hear from you with that invite on a recurring basis. If someone really isn't showing up, probably your appeal's falling on deaf ears, so maybe remove them from the list. Um, can I give an example of what I think is a compelling call to action? I'm sure I have plenty of gold star appeals. I know that we've posted some to our blog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for some of those blog posts. I'm making a note of that right now. And then in the follow-up to this webinar, later this week when I send you the recording, I'm going to try to send you links to some blog posts that feature individual donation content that we find really rad. Because I've made up a lot of examples tonight, and I don't want to make up one that's not ideal. So I'm going to send you an example later this week when I send you the recording. All right, so we're a little past time. I hope you all have yummy dinners waiting for you or can go unwind right now. And thank you again for attending tonight's presentation. I hope we talk soon. Okay, have a good one. Bye-bye.